I want to have a quick chat to you about the idea that AI is replacing us. And I think at the end of it, you might have a different opinion. Well, I hope you do. So let's start by going back to the beginning. AI was only practically born 6 years ago. In 2020, ChatGPT 3 or thereabouts came out, and some advanced little startups had access to it and started playing with it. But none of us really knew anything about that. In November 23, and if you think about that, that's almost 3 years ago to the day that ChatGPT developed the chat interface, which allowed us to ask questions of that brain that was born a few years ago. So, technically, obviously, LLMs have been around a long time, but in its current incarnation, where it's accessible to us, it's only been around a short period of time. So, 3 years ago, it was literally just something that could answer questions. And so we started with that. And we then entered into the wrapper era. So, the wrapper era is what happened was the brain was seen as an opportunity. A lot of entrepreneurs and innovators looked at that and they created an interface that accessed that brain that was simply just more user friendly. I think one of the very first ones, if not the first one, was Jenny AI, which was something that helped college students do some research and write papers. And they became a multi-million ARR business. But that was rapidly followed by a lot. So no domain was left untouched, whether it's design or finance or legal or coding or whatever. These wrappers were created with a bit of extra training, with a different interface, and they all tapped into those core LLM models and started offering those services. At the same time, that little ecosystem that was forming could start talking to all the other existing apps. So it could connect to something like Salesforce or Asana or Notion or whatever accounting system you may have had or an ERP, etc. So suddenly this brain became something that was quite connected and quite skilled. So think about it as having eyes and ears. The next era is where we find ourselves today. So 26, 27. So this is the agentic era. And this brain has now already got eyes and ears, and it's now also developed the hands and feet. The main thing that happened was it got browser access. So the brain could now suddenly move the mouse on your screen and start doing things. Then what it did was sort of packaged up into skills, and those skills were set and repeatable and repetitive. And so they could do the same thing over and over again, which then also allowed us to build some routines where they could go and do a specific thing that they knew how to do at a specific time regularly, every week, every month, or whatever. And then it could remember all of that. So now you really have a brain that can really do almost everything that a human can do, but only in the digital domain. So it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out what happens next, right? So, parallel to all of this has been the development of the exoskeleton. So, we needed a place for this brain to go and sit. And people like Elon has been building Optimus, and there's obviously a few of them around all over the world. But just generally, if you think about this now, the brain can now be attached to a mechanical device. So it can think, remember, decide, do, and in the real world, in the analog world, it can now start moving things, building things, creating things, not just on the computer. So this is effectively a replacement for the worker. At the moment, the only thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't feel. But if you've had a chat to ChatGPT or Claude or any of those, you'll know that they come very close at mimicking what feelings look like. So, what does that mean for the future? So, generative AI, so those first few slides that we looked at was all about just chat, right? So, they went for the easy jobs first, customer service, etc. But as they develop skills, they now are going after the jobs of lawyers and accountants and designers and coders and what have you. And the same thing will happen with these robots or autonomous agents. They will replace, warehouse workers and baristas, stuff where it's a relatively routine, but over time it'll develop and they will become more skilled and able to work across a diverse range of domains. The two big risks that we then face as a society, really, at the first level, is there's an existential risk. So, and then the other risk is that we do nothing. So, the existential risk is really about, thinking about these things that we're creating killing us. So maybe we do end up with cyborgs, and maybe everybody's evil, and maybe they don't know what they're doing, and we all end up living in the matrix or getting killed by the matrix or something. The reality is, most of us practically can't do much about that. So that is going to play out the way that it's going to play out. The other thing, though, the inaction, that is something that we can do about. We can learn to work with AI. We can create some workflows. We can learn how to prompt. We can learn how to set up routines. We can, keep studying. We can keep evolving and innovating and trying to ride this wave. That's a choice. The alternative is to consistently complain about AI slop and what have you. But instead of doing that, just learn how to create stuff that's non-slop. Infuse the AI with your judgment and your feelings and your sense of taste and all of that, and make it better and make it bespoke and make it something that other people might want. And therefore, you're able to ride the wave. If you look at, what Elon is doing, it's actually quite crazy, the level of vision that he is applying to what he does on a day-to-day basis. And he already owns the brain, which is XAI. He's building the body, that's Optimus. Then he owns the communications, which is the infrastructure that you need, for the brain and the body to come together. And then he owns the transportation, SpaceX, to take those bodies to Mars. And why Mars? Because you know what? Those robots don't need a non toxic environment like the Earth. We don't have to worry about climate change on Mars. You don't have to worry about unions on Mars. You don't have to worry about a lot of things on Mars. So if you have a billion robots running around Mars building stuff, SpaceX ships the robots there and the products that they make back to Earth, and all stitched together with his Starlink communications network, then he's built the whole ecosystem of the future. Now, I don't say that to say that we should all do that, because very few of us, none of us really, can do that. But he is still just a human being, however smart or however rich he is, he's just a human being, and he is doing something about it. And I think that's an example, and that's the example that I believe we should think about adopting, is to be proactive and have our own vision of our own future. So that's the start. If this is something that you like talking about, if this is something that you're grappling with in your business, we're in my business, we're building some tools and infrastructure and scaffolding to help SMEs deal with that. So if you want to have a conversation, just like, subscribe, follow along, find me on the internet. I've got nothing to sell you at the moment, but we can have a conversation, and I'm happy to have that conversation with you.